Okay, so what I'd like to talk about now are squares and square root. So we have squares and square roots. So let's focus on squares first. So when we talk about squares, we've something we can write something like this. So 3 to the power of 2. So this is what we mean by, now what this means, it means 3 multiplied by 3, which is equal to 9. So this here is what's known, it's pronounced 3 squared, okay? And this number here at the top, this number here, is what's known as the index. They call it an index or a power. And this number can change. So for example, you could have 3 to the power of 3. What that means is that you have the number 3 and you multiply it by itself 3 times. 3 by 3 is 9. 9 nines 18. So it's equal to, so 3 nines, do this here. So 3 multiplied by 9 is equal to 27. That's 27. Similarly, so this is 3 cubed, this one here is 3 squared, and similarly that you could have 3 to the power of 4. So that's just the way you would say that, it's 3 to the power of 4. So it just means 3 multiplied by 3 multiplied by 3 multiplied by 3. So you have 3 multiplied by itself 4 times. Now when we have a number written like this, okay, like written like any of these here, it's known as, it's in what's called its index form. Okay, like 27 for example, instead of writing 27, you could write it like this. So you would be writing 27 in its index form, or in its power form. Now sometimes you might get problems where you will have, for example, you could have 2 multiplied by 5 to the power of 2. What's that equal to? So what you have to do in order to do this, you have to work out this index or power first. So that's going to be equal to 2 multiplied by 5 multiplied by 5. So that's equal to 2 multiplied by 5 fives are 25, and that's equal to 50. So you'd always work out the index first. So just a couple of different examples of that. So let's say just some examples. Just some examples of problems you could get that have squares in them. So you could have something like this, 4 to the power of 3, and you could be asked to work out that. So what does that mean? It's 4 multiplied by 4 multiplied by 4, which is equal to 64. Okay, so it's 4 multiplied by itself a few times, 4 times. You could get something like this, 4 to the power of 2 minus 3 to the power of 2. So again, with this one, what you have to do is you have to work out your indexes first. So you're going to have, so 4 by 4 is equal to 16. And then the 3 multiplied by 3 is equal to 9. So then you'd have 16 minus 9, which is equal to 7. So you could be asked to do something like this. So half, so do that. So you could be asked for something like, 1 second now. So something like this. So half of 8 to the power of 2. So what's that equal to? So first of all, you have to get 8 to the power of 2. So 8 multiplied by 8 is equal to 64. And then a half of 64 is going to be equal to 32. So these are just some kind of just examples of questions that you could be asked that have squares in them. Now, so this is an index or a power. Now the opposite of that then is what's known as a square root. And let's just look at that. Just divide the screen up. So we have a square root. So something like this. So if we have the square root of 16. So that means the square root of 16. So what you're basically looking for, what this is looking for, you're looking for a number that when you multiply it by itself will give you the 16. So what that means is, so if you think about it, the square root of 16 is equal to 4. So what that means is that 4 to the power of 2, so you're multiplying, is equal to 4 multiplied by 4, which is equal to 16. So 4 then is what's known as the square root, because what you're doing is you're multiplying it. So if you have a square root like this, the opposite of a square root is an index. And what this means is it's implied it's the second root of 16, okay, or the square root. They don't put this number 2 up here, but that's what it means. So the square root of 16 is equal to 4, therefore 4 to the power of 2 is equal to 4 by 4 is equal to 16. So when we're looking for the square of something, we're looking for the number that when you multiply it by itself will give you this number inside here, or what's known as the square root of 16. So some other examples, if you have, for example, the square root of 25, that means, so the square root of 25 is 5. So if we think about that, so 5 to the power of 2 is equal to 5 multiplied by 5, which is equal to 25. And that's, so the square root of 25 is 5, just like we've got here. So basically what you're looking for is, you're looking for the number that when you multiply it by itself will give you the number that's inside this symbol here. And this is the symbol, this means the square root of. So some like just questions that you could be asked. So if you had something like this, so the square root of 64 plus 2 to the power of 3, what's that going to be equal to? So you work out the square root of 64. So the square root of 64 is 8. So if we take, so for example, 8 multiplied by 8 is equal to 64. So it's the number that when you multiply by itself will give you 64. So in this case, the square root, this is what the square root is going to be equal to. It's going to be equal to 64. And then 2 to the power of 3. So what does that mean? So it's plus, it's 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2, which is equal to 8 as well. So this is going to be 8 plus 8, which is equal to 16. Let's think of some other kind of examples that you could get when you're dealing with square roots. You could get, let's see. So if you had something like this, 3 multiplied by 2 to the power of 2 plus 2 times the square root of 81. So again, what you do is you'll do the index first and then the square root. So it's going to be 3 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 2 is 4 plus, and then you're going to have 2 multiplied by the square root of 81. So the square root of 81 is 9. So it's going to be 2 multiplied by 9. So remember the square root, this is like 9 by 9 will give you 81. So therefore the square root of 81 is 9. So now what you do, so see the way we have here, So we have plus and we have multiplied. So what you do is you do the multiplication first and then you add them together. So 3 by 4 is 12 plus 2 by 9 is 18, and when you add the two of them together you get 30. Okay, so that's what we mean by when we look at, for example, the squares and square roots. That's what it means. That's what we have talked about in this lesson. So you have squares, and then you have squares, and then you have square roots. So remember, just as a reminder, so squares, this is the square, it's an index or a power, and this smaller number that's up here. So this 3 to the power of 2 means 3 multiplied by 3 is 9. When we write a number in this form, it's what's known as the index form. So again, these are just some examples of that. When we talk about the square root, we're talking about this symbol here. So an example of that is the square root of 16, which is equal to 4. So what you're looking for is the number that when you multiply by itself will give you this number. So for the example of 16, the square root of 4. So that means 4 multiplied by 4 is equal to 16. Now what's important as well, you could get, like for example, hard problems, like something like this. So if you were asked for the square root, let me just change that now. So if you were asked for, let's say, the square root of 289, now that's not an easy one to just come up with off the top of your head. So what you would do is you'd use your calculator. So on your calculator, you're going to have this symbol here, okay? So what you do is you would do 289, and then you get the square root, you press the button, and it'll give you what the square root is. So it's 17. So the square root of 289 is 17. So what that means is that if you have 17 raised to the power 2, which is 17 by 17, that's going to be equal to 289. So that's what we mean. So it's a number that when you multiply by itself will give you the number that's inside this particular symbol here. So that's what we mean by square roots and squares. Okay, so thank you for listening.